Could this be the end of buyer's agents? Stay tuned to find out. Hello again, this is Robert West and another Keepin real estate agent. And today we're going to talk about the recent lawsuits brought up regarding paying a buyer's agent commission. And so when a person goes to sell a home, say a seller goes to sell a home, they usually have either done it by themselves or they may hire a listing agent to assist them in the selling of their home. And if the listing agent doesn't have a buyer ready to go, they may have another buyer who's looking on the MLS and they have a buyer ready to go. And so, to be fair, they say, well, you got a buyer ready to go. My purpose is to list and then sell this home. You bring your buyer to me, I'll split the commission with you. And that's how this usually works. But lately, I'm not sure what it is. Some people call it greed, whatever. But everybody's trying to really stretch the dollar. Now, home prices are going up. So, I'm not sure how much more you could stretch a dollar and how much more you could pocket. I think this market is pretty hot and a lot of it has brought in some inflationary pressures. But with that being said, the end of a buyer's agent, and let's talk about that for just a moment here and the importance of a buyer's agent. I represent both sides. I've represented the listing side. Actually, my first transactions were listings. And so it was very good for me to get behind the scenes and figure out, basically the bread and butter of real estate and putting the sign out and get the house prepared to sell and staging it, photography in the whole 9 yards. And then, of course, bringing the buyer and whatnot. And I actually got both sides on my first transaction, so it was a really good experience. But then, of course, sometimes some people would reach out to me and ask them to assist them in buying their home. And so I did that as well. And so I kind of understand both sides of the coin. Sometimes listing agents don't really get both sides of the coins. And this is all kind of going back to them. So let's talk about this for just a second. If we're say there was the end of buyer agency and what that would entail. So first of all, I believe that it would be kind of not a favorable position for people who are buying real estate. Now, real estate isn't rocket science necessarily, but one thing that people don't really get is because it's such a large financial decision, there's a lot of emotions that are tied to real estate. And a good buyer's agent understands that going in, bringing the buyer to the table. We want them to negotiate the best price, so the offer is accepted. But we also want them to understand that, we're going to have to kind of play it by ear and try to almost do a little bit of a dance sometimes because we come up with inspections, something's not favorable, and we want to give them the opportunity to get some of those things resolved so that they are going in to a good home once they purchase this home. They're spending a lot of money, average closing costs right now could be anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000, and that's just closing costs. We're not even talking about a down payment. And so if we were to get rid of a buyer's agent, so say, for example, like I said, the real estate transaction, usually the seller listing agent will split the commission. Well, this lawsuit is saying that, seller's saying, we don't want to split the commission anymore. We want the buyers to come up with the commission for being represented. So that adds more pressure to them in purchasing. And I think that's what's going to happen. It's going to actually drive prices down because, the extra capital the buyer would have had to possibly place a higher offer has been diminished. Now they're having to pay out, closing costs for themselves, which is with the bank and the title or attorney, and, insurance and stuff like that. And then they're also doing their down payment. And then if they, because they value the expertise and help of a real estate agent and they're going to pay their commission, that's really going to put a hamper on things. Now, some people believe this. Well, they're just going to get rid of the buyer's agent. And that might be the case, And unfortunately, again, that's not going to help the consumer at all, especially because now the seller and the listing agent are going to hold all the cards. Now, there are disclosure laws, and don't get me wrong, they should be disclosing these things, but sometimes they're not all the way forthright. I'm not sure why, but sometimes that happens. And therefore they don't share everything they should share. they might put additional pressure on the buyer to go ahead and accept the house as is. They said, well, we've already got inspection done. Here's your inspection. Well, on the buyer's side, if you're being represented with the buyer's agent would encourage you to get an inspection, possibly get a survey done, because maybe the lines that they have mapped out or are saying are the lines aren't necessarily the lines that are supposed to be on the property. And next thing you know, you purchase the property and you go in, you find a shed that is 8 inches over the line. I had a discussion recently with a prospective client, and they mentioned that they were sued for almost $1 million for having a shed 8 inches over the line. And so, if they weren't represented by a buyer's agent, and when I talked to them, it didn't sound like they were, a buyer's agent would have said, hey, look, there's questions about the size of this property. We definitely need to go survey. And there's so many more things that a buyer's agent has to offer. And that's what I'm kind of concerned about. If this lawsuit goes through, we change the structure of how buyer agents are getting paid. That's going to put more pressure on those who represent buyers to just go after listings. And there's a lot of people in the firm that are just fine with that, and more power to them. But the reason why I got in real estate, and I'm a little bit different, is because I do care about people. I had a decent real estate agent. We'd had a pretty good transaction overall, but there's some things that they missed. And I felt like, thinking back on it, there's things I could have done better. And I'm not perfect by any means. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that I try to pay attention to detail for my clients. I try to go the extra step, uncovering things for them. And I've done that before on both sides, the seller side, buyer side, whatever. For example, there was one time where this buyer was sitting there looking for a certain square footage. And, they probably worked with other agents before, and they kept seeing things that, they might have been shared a couple things and it wasn't working out. Well, I was like, I kind of went in, looked at the house, and I could see if a square footage is a little bit different. I could say, hey, look, maybe we look at this and it works out for you because maybe the listing agent made a mistake. And sometimes that happens in a listing, and they'll go in and they'll just throw out something from the county and not really pay attention to the layout and the structure of the home. And so those things that a seasoned buyer's agent will help a buyer understand and get more benefit from it, and it'll make it worth their while. So in closing, possibly what's going to happen is this. We have a buyer's agency agreement. And typically when we have a buyer side or buyer agency agreement, it says how much commission the buyer agent is expected to earn at the close of the transaction. Now, we put in an amount, 2, 3%, 2.5%, or a specific dollar amount. And most of the time we're able to cover that because we do work with another agent in the MLS or whatever, and are able to negotiate the commission between the two parties, and we accept the commission as it's given. Now, sometimes those commissions low, and that's kind of stretching, pushing the envelope too, but that's another story for another time. But generally, if we're able to accept that commission that they split with us, we don't go back to the buyer and say, hi, buyer, you have to come up with some more additional money and put additional pressure on them when they're already doing a lot of things behind the scenes. They're doing inspections, they're doing a survey, they're getting moving stuff ready to go and all that. So what it may boil down to is at the end, if this goes through, we may see more situations where the buyer agent will have to ask for payment at the end of transaction, and more likely the buyers who are looking, they're going to say, you know what, we may be able to do that, we may not be able to do that, but at the end we might not get the best representation, but we're going to kind of cut the corner here because we need to buy our home. And that's not really fair to consumers, I don't believe. That's just my opinion on it. Again, this is Robert West, Keeping It Real with a Real Estate Agent. I'm just sharing with you my thoughts on the whole situation, and I'll leave some information here in the description as well so that you can read up on the lawsuit and all that boils down to. This has been another Keeping It Real with a Real Estate Agent. End of buyer agency agreement. What does that mean to you? Let me know in the comments below. Is this the end of buyer agency? Positive, negative? What can you expect? Feel free to share your comments, and I'll be sure to engage you. And thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Thank you.